WNS abrupt ending to a pretty glorious season for the Ravens. Anytime you're hosting own playoff games, this guy knows all about being in the winner's circle and holding the Lombardi Trophy, and he also knows about losing NFC Championship games and playoff games and all that good stuff. So it is familiar territory for our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation and our partner here at WNST.net. We welcome head coach Brian Billick back on, and these are always the toughest circumstances, right? Like there's that 24 or 48 hour or 72 hour period of, oh, we're not going to New England. We don't have bus trips. That's right. Now it's time to mow the lawn and get a new cell phone and plan the spring, right, Coach?
Yeah, and anytime in the wild card in particular, because it's so hard fought to get there. In the last couple games of the season for most of these wild card teams was win and get in, and that gives you a sense of, okay, yes, we do belong. And they were all incredibly close games. I mean, every single one of these was a 1, 2, 3 point game across the board, and uniquely, with the exception of the Cowboys, it was the visiting team that was able to pull out the win. So, yeah, when you're at home and you've gotten there the way the Ravens have, it is shocking. Yeah, no more so than it feels that same way, I'm sure, for the Bears and the same for the Texans. But I think in this instance, the Ravens, because of the way they were doing things and the way it was stacking up as to who they were going to play, there were some very legitimate expectations that this could be a nice deep run. And so when it ends right now, all four teams that are sitting here on Monday after the loss is like, whoa, what happened? And you immediately start to change gears going to, well, what do we do next year?
Coach, whether it was Scott Mitchell or Stoney Case or Jeff Blake or Steve McNair, wherever it was, it didn't feel like you spent a lot of nights, you were up late wondering who your quarterback was going to be. This year with John and this was a unique thing all the way around, not just that you change a quarterback, you change your offense during a bye week based on an injury. You don't go back to a Super Bowl winning a guy who won it for you, not just a guy who won one, a guy who you have some feeling toward if you're John Harbaugh. The way the whole thing played out was curious, and down 3 touchdowns, and then Lamar rallies them to the point where an onside kick may change things at the end. There were a lot of coaching decisions that were made in the framework of Sunday's game for Coach Harbaugh, and the fans certainly screamed for Joe Flacco. The offense didn't work on Sunday, Coach. I mean, I don't want to say out-coach because I never used that, but the Chargers had a plan, and it worked.
Well, and we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this for the remainder of the year until we kick it off next year as to what exactly it means and where we're at. Obviously it was a unique circumstance, and not so unique that you brought a young quarterback into play, but the nature of what obviously Lamar Jackson can do and what he's going to be able to do. I was a little disappointed and surprised, frankly, to hear the fans boo Lamar Jackson in that second half. Now, not that his performance didn't deserve it, but the fact that, the run he's put them on, if everybody is acutely aware of, this is what he is. This is what he does, both good and bad.
Well, we've only seen it work. We haven't seen it not work.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, again, like we said, with the exception of San Diego, the teams that they had beaten were not great teams and not great defenses. So you got a little bit of a false sense of, this can really be good. And as we talked about all week long on the NFL Network, we talked about on the pregame show, and it was great fun for me to be. I was out on the plaza by the Ray Lewis and Johnny Unitas statues with Amber Theo Harris. We were doing our hits for the NFL Network, and it was so much fun to watch the fans and visit with the fans as they filed in and the expectations for what the day was going to bring. But and what we had made comment, as did everybody that I heard talking about it, was questioning, okay, what is it now for a team as good as the Chargers are, and they are good, and uniquely positioned in terms of their talent. Okay, what does it mean for them now to face this Lamar Jackson offense for the second time? Everybody that saw it for the first time, even if they weren't a great defense, it was, okay, how do we deal with this? And I had made the point going in that the Chargers, the number one job for them, They saw what worked in the first game. They just had to stick with it. They had to commit to putting the extra guys into the box, and again, they have some unique players that are safety/linebackers with James and Phillips and Adai, and that's the formation they got. They had 6 and 7 DBs in there 90% of the time to use the athleticism to stop the run and dare them to throw the ball. And that seemed to be a pretty good formula. We've talked many times about, well, okay, does this mean that we're going to usher the college game into the NFL? And I think we had an emphatic no yesterday, or I should say on Sunday, because we saw what the athleticism of the NFL, and when coaches have a chance to truly look at and dissect and play for the second time, that style of play, it's just not going to hold up in the NFL. So that's the challenges right now for the Ravens going forward. There were a lot of good things Lamar Jackson did. We clearly saw his inability or his difficulty in just physically throwing the ball successfully on a regular basis. What are they going to do going forward? Do they feel like he's the guy and he's just going to get better enough and you wrap that around there? Or how do you feel about your quarterback position? Clearly Joe Flacco, and I don't know that Joe's going to leave. Hard for to imagine him coming back. It would be hard to go back to Joe Flacco, I think, because again, like the fans the other day that were clamoring for Joe to go in. The nature of Lamar's game and what they practiced all week, Joe couldn't go in. What are you going to do? You'd have to go in and run a bunch of plays you hadn't practiced in 6 to 7 weeks. So that just wasn't going to work.
Head coach Brian Billick joining us here on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Of course, you can follow him out on Twitter at Coach Billick as things don't settle down for you. You move on, playoffs, NFL Network, all that stuff. We'll be in Atlanta together, and I'm sure Coach will be visiting us on our Radio Row set as Luke and I make our way there. In the aftermath of all of this, then there is the coaching part of this and the time for pay and play. And here we go with John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco out into the trade market and who needs a quarterback. I'm not settled on John Harbaugh being the coach of the team until I see an extension coach, and I know it's you were in that position at one point, but this is the week where all hell could break loose if it's going to break loose, and if not, there's going to be kumbaya, and John's going to have a 5-year extension or whatever that's going to be, because there are 8 jobs open right now. This is a wild, wild west week for coaching all the way around, not just here.
It is, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Ravens do and what John Harbaugh does, and I have no knowledge of exactly what the thinking is going forward, other than my own experiences, both with the organization as a whole. This is going to be interesting to see how it pans out, because you're right. If it could very easily, Ravens go, look, we know we've got our coach, we're committed. Yes, here's another 4 or 5 year contract. All's good. Let's go. Now, the other part may be, well, and we know the organization, Steve Bisciotti in particular, even though there's been a rough stint, and it's the last 3-4 years, and now it's good to be back in the playoffs. I also know that firsthand that Steve is not comfortable with being a good team one year and being out of the playoffs the next, then good the next year and out of the next. There's got to be that consistency of playoff. And if there's any question at all about whether John is the guy to do that, and the extension is less than a full-throated, here's a 4 and 5 year commensurate with a Super Bowl winning coach at whatever millions that is going rate right now, that John Harbaugh may say, well, wait a minute, if you're not going to be more forthcoming or more, stronger, there's a market out there probably for me. And if you're uncertain about me, well, then why don't we part ways and see where we go from here? Now, if that happens, then the Ravens have to look, okay, but then what? Because there's a lot of coaching vacancy out there. How are you going to fill it? Not the least of which is the decisions that has to be made. Are we indeed going to totally commit? And is Lamar Jackson our quarterback for the future? That's a different question, and John Harbaugh needs to look at that. From my standpoint, if he believes Lamar Jackson is that future, it can be everything that they say he's going to be, then absolutely you want to sign on. If he privately in the back of his mind is thinking, I don't know that this is going to win, I don't know that he's truly going to be that kind of guy, then he may not, if indeed the organization thinks that, he may not want to be saddled with that. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and none of us is going to know until they ultimately get done what they want to get done. Only John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome and now Eric DeCosta are going to be able to answer those questions. Dick Cass, and we'll have the answer to those questions probably over the next couple of weeks. But there's a lot of moving parts to this.
Well, Coach, maybe on a personal level, when I see Vic Fangio, one of your guys, and 8 jobs out there, and this is what you did for a living for most of your life. The qualifications are, do you have a franchise quarterback? What kind of ownership are you? Who's picking my football players? Who's picking the groceries? Do I have a rush edge? Do I have a cornerback? All of those kind of questions. This isn't the most attractive place, right? I mean, and with the Packers job open, the Dolphins job open, a lot of money being dangled around, from a professional standpoint, we're going to find out where John Harbaugh is on maybe I want to go create a second dream, build a second thing. Look at what Andy Reid's done out in Kansas City. I mean, right. Andy may say to you or him or any of his other buddies, hey, Philadelphia was nice and I didn't get up the mountain there, but this second thing's been even more lovely. And I was one of those people that always thought you were going to take a second job somewhere else, that you would want that second life. John might want that more than he wants to stay here. Sean Payton had to answer those questions a couple of years ago, and he stayed, and look at where they are this week. So I think it is very, very individual to the human being and to where they are and what else is out there. And if you're a head coach at any point, there's never been more out there than is out there right now when there are 8 jobs available, right?
Yeah, I mean, you make a very valid point. I've made the point several times. Bill Walsh, the legendary Bill Walsh, God rest his soul, was very much a believer and walked away from the Super Bowl champion 49 organization because he believed 10 years was about it. That you can't go more than 10 years because of the familiarity of the owner and just the message from the coach to the owner to the players to the media, the whole 9 yards. You just need that fresh start. Andy Reid's a perfect example for you to bring that up, that it worked that way. There are some coaches that firmly believe, and you look at Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells understood that there was a shelf life and programmably moved on. Mike Holmgren, remember, left Green Bay to go to Seattle, probably for that very same reason. That's not to say one way is right or the other. You're right. This comes down to John Harbaugh and how he values it. It is certainly a different set of expectations, regardless of the contract he will get, coming back to the Ravens, however it transpires, because of the history he's had here, both good and bad, and going someplace else new and being the fair-haired boy that, oh boy, are we in good shape now, and kind of get to start anew. So you're exactly right. And so, yeah, there's a lot of questions open to that as to exactly where how the organization looks at that and how John Harbaugh looks at that.
We have head coach Brian Billick here on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. You can always learn more about how they learn and do over in East Baltimore with my pal James Bond at livingclassrooms.org as well. Coach, before I let you go, there were 3 other, jet-setting teams here, right? I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Philadelphia Eagles late into the night on Sunday night all get to move on. All good stories as we now move toward this week in the aftermath of our Purple Fever around here. We'll be watching football this week, and 4 interesting matchups, I think, coast to coast, and 2 Los Angeles teams in the divisional round. How about that for your homeland out there in the Redlands, huh?
Yeah, it's always interesting. We go through the same thing every year. We get so focused on the great story of these wild card teams and the potential for them. And boy, these teams, you look at the Dallas Cowboys, that looked like a team that was as good an offensive output as we've seen the Cowboys in a long time. And they're running the ball, and Dak Prescott looked good, and they're playing great defense. And you can talk yourself to saying, boy, the Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. Or you can look at this Charger team and what they were able to do, different challenge for them versus the Patriots. I think they're going to match up very well. But we have to remind ourselves, as we do every year, the teams that had the bye, the number 1 and 2 seeds, had a bye for a reason, because they're pretty damn good. So we have to remind ourselves of just how explosive the Chiefs can be, how balanced the Rams are. Brady and Belichick and the Patriots, enough said, and just how totally comprehensive, maybe the best team in football, the Saints are. So that's going to be the challenge. It's going to be interesting. I think there's some good matchups there. I really do think that the Cowboys can go in and challenge the Rams. I think the Colts can certainly challenge the Chiefs. I think the Chargers, and they've proven once again, they can do that West Coast, East Coast. They are much more suited to beat the Patriots, I think, than they were to beat the Ravens. And the Eagles and Saints, you kind of figure that Saints written all over it, but you know what? The Eagles have got the pedigree and they're believing. So this is going to be a great weekend of football.
Head coach Brian Billick tweets. You can find him at Coach Billick. He'll be with the NFL Network all week, breaking things down as we get closer to Atlanta and joining us on Radio Row. Coach, always appreciate the support. We will see you on the other side and see how this thing flushes out with the Ravens here this week as well.
Sounds great.
There he goes, head coach Brian Billick on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, learning by doing, and they're doing great work over at the Under Armour House and everything that Living Classrooms does. We'll get James Bond on here sometime soon to chat with us about all that. All of our community and charity stuff brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. Billy Cole will be here providing some psychotherapy for me in the middle of the week as I now have to start talking about spring training and the Orioles and the Terps. But I don't think we're done with the Ravens and certainly aren't done with football as it relates to Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh and the future of the Ravens with Lamar Jackson and Eric DeCosta. Plenty out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper delivers to you, all brought to you by Planet Fitness and the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they're racing this week. The entries on the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. Last but never least, if there is any weirdness or breaking news out of Owings Mills, you will get it first in the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzos will be here from 3 until 5 on Thursday. I will be joining him for the SSV on WNST as we get you ready for playoff football this weekend and continue to discuss the aftermath of a thud ending, quite frankly, to a pretty fun little November and December that was captured out of nowhere in 4 and 5 around Halloween. The 2018 Ravens season done. A strange one. We'll continue to recap it around here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.